On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we will look at some of the top news items from across the space, as well as speak with Serro Solutions to discuss how SD-WAN is now being applied to combat evolving security threats such as DDoS and other aggressive attacks. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News. Well, on today's show, we have an interview with Nitin Serro, who's the founder and CEO of Serro Solutions, to look at how SD-WAN is now being applied to combat evolving security threats such as DDoS and other aggressive attacks. But first, let's take a look at some of the top headlines from across the telecom-related NFV, SDN, cloud, and software space from the past week. Well, Ericsson continued to push into the software space, announcing plans to acquire full interest in San Francisco-based NodePrime in a move to accelerate support for software-defined infrastructure. The NodePrime platform currently provides support for Ericsson's Hyperscale Datacenter System 8000 product. Financial terms of the deal were not disclosed, but it will see Ericsson pick up 100% control of NodePrime, including 15 employees, which will be integrated into the vendor's business unit, cloud, and IP division. NodePrime's platform is said to be the only infrastructure management platform and is designed to support command and control of the complete ecosystem of components in today's existing data centers. NodePrime emerged last September with $7 million in seed money from Ericsson, Menlo Ventures, NIA, Formation 8, Initialized Capital, Crossing Capital, and TEEC Angel Fund. The move included the unveiling of its platform that was said to be used by SAP, Ericsson, and GoDaddy. Ericsson has been bolstering its software work in the telecom space revolving around SDN, NFV, and cloud platforms. The company late last year announced a partnership with Cisco, calling for the companies to combine platforms to target telecom operators and reportedly produce at least $1 billion in incremental revenue opportunities for each company beginning in 2018. When announced, the partnership was said to offer a platform including routing, data center, networking, cloud, mobility, management, and control, and tap their respective global footprints to create the networks of the future. The company said the network support is to include 5G, cloud, IP, and the Internet of Things, and that Ericsson and Cisco provide teams to jointly work on an initiative targeting SDN, NFV, and network management and control. Also this week, Affirm Networks launched its service automation platform, which it claims allows mobile operators to reduce the time to market and operational costs of introducing new services by as much as 90%. The platform is said to provide automated service provisioning to legacy and virtualized networks, which Affirm noted allows operators to develop new services without the need for complex coding or the risk of unnecessary errors associated with today's manual approach. In a move to bolster its claim, Affirm, along with Mellanox and Red Hat, commissioned a study from Core Analysis looking at the business case of a virtualized automated service provisioning environment. Not surprisingly, the study found network operators deploying automated service provisioning can experience significant savings and faster time to revenue when launching services. Specifically, the study found provisioning of new enterprise customers for VPN as a service resulted in operational savings of between 76% and 87%. The launching of a mobile virtual network operator customer resulted in operational savings of between 92% and 97%, and the provisioning of multiple sponsored data or zero rating plans resulted in savings of between 83% and 97%. Well, as always, a lot of news from across the space over the past week. Well, for this week's featured interview, we spoke with Serro Solutions founder and CEO Nitin Serro to get some background on the company and look at how SD-WAN is now being applied to combat evolving security threats such as DDoS and other aggressive attacks. Let's take a look at the interview now. Well, thanks for joining us this week. My name is Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief here at RCR Wireless News. This week, we are joined by Nitin Serro, who's the founder and CEO of Serro, to talk a bit about the SD-WAN space, but also security aspects when it comes to that market. So, hey, Nitin, thanks so much for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Maybe to start off with, for those who don't know much about the company, maybe a little background. Obviously, I'm guessing by your last name and the company's name, you are very familiar with the company. So, yeah, maybe a little background on the company.
Sure. Serro started as a design implement firm for large-scale networks, primarily service providers within continental North America. We then actually morphed into emerging service providers, like people that had content to distribute, now they are referred to web services companies.
Yep.
What we learned during that engagements was automation was key to operate at large scale. And that was the founding of Serro, to take the mentality of automation that web services companies had employed and bring it to mass market. So Serro is a system integrator for automation services for large network or infrastructure companies.
Right. And obviously, I know automation, we do a lot of on this show on the SDN and NFV space, and obviously automation is a big part of that kind of emerging trend, especially for telecom operators looking to deploy virtualization of the networks. Automation is kind of the end goal for a lot of these guys. So sounds like you guys are at a prime spot there. But maybe let's start off with a bit. I know one thing we want to talk about was kind of security in terms of the SD-WAN space. And I know SD-WAN has been, I've seen recently a lot of talk about it. I've had a few companies on here talking about the topic, and it seems like it's getting a lot of traction out there. Obviously, enterprises are looking for different ways to kind of maybe more manage their communication and their data needs out there. So maybe, I guess you can talk a bit about the market and kind of how you see how it's being deployed out there today, maybe how enterprises are looking to deploy the technology today.
Sure. Generally, SD-WAN is deployed or employed for companies to have branch offices turn up and connect to data center, or to actually connect to cloud infrastructure companies, whether it's WebEx, whether it's Salesforce, and there are multiple business applications in the cloud. But how do you optimize user experiences within those corporate structures to the services companies? That's traditionally how SD-WAN is looked at. And it also employs the fact that it should be easy to operate, to turn up and turn down. What we are seeing in the SD-WAN, or how we are getting bucketed into the SD-WAN solution, is many companies have large data centers across geographies, and they have multiple ISPs that are associated with these data centers. And how do you actually cost effectively manage the incoming and outgoing of traffic into those data centers? The key aspect of it being to reduce financial OPEX associated with service providers that are providing you that service. Mm-hmm. So while we get bucketed into the SD-WAN space, which are mainly for branch offices to connect to data centers, there's no solution right now to provide data center financial cost efficiencies at a global scale. So that's where we are seeing the SD-WAN, and in particular on the financial metrics associated with service provider connectivity to those data centers.
Okay, and then obviously when it comes to kind of these deployments, enterprises are always cognizant of the security aspect of all of this. It does seem like on a weekly basis, daily basis, we always hear about some sort of security issue with a lot of these new deployments. And obviously when it comes to data centers, all that data in those centers, I mean, obviously you want to make sure that there's security aspects of that. I know from the telecom space, operators are constantly being, kind of reminded of the fact that of the importance of security, and they're also very cognizant of the fact they have to kind of keep up on that as well. So again, as you look at that, I guess what's the security angle on that, or what's the security issues in terms of these growing SD-WAN deployments out there in the market?
Sure. So as a security solution, there are multiple publicly traded companies that provide in-depth security solutions, whether it's vulnerability detection, whether it's DDoS mitigation, whether it is threat prevention. All these tools provide you the attack vector. What these tools don't do is actually execute commands to other infrastructure resources, whether it's firewalls, whether it's routers, whether it's switches, whether it's load balancers. They just tell you that you are being attacked, and this is the reason you're being attacked. But it involves another team executing the commands to prevent further damage. Mm-hmm. So how do we play in is we actually are an automation system integrator. So we define playbooks depending on the solutions the customers have. It could be Alcatel-Lucent on the route switch side. It could be Juniper on the route switch side. Each vendor has some form of APIs. It could be a different vendor for load balancers. It could be a different vendor for firewalls. And we take all the APIs such that it can then talk back to the third-party security applications or products that the companies have, but in real time execute the changes on other infrastructure resources based on some policy that we have set in. So we particularly don't have a security solution. Mm-hmm. We provide the capability to take information from the threat detection systems and execute changes to multiple vendors in your infrastructure or the company's infrastructure such that there's damage control right away as opposed to making errors and taking time when you're already vulnerable.
Makes sense. Okay, I guess then working with these vendors out there, whether it's an Alcatel-Lucent or whoever it's going to be, as you mentioned, they have these APIs already in place. I guess how open are they to working with providers like yourself to allow to have the security level on it? Because I would think that some of these guys probably have maybe their own type of security solutions also, but perhaps they're not as in depth. Or obviously your guys' expertise is an automation aspect of it. How open is the community to working with various vendors to make sure this is all can all work together out there?
So most of the vendors are very open to providing an API for machine-to-machine compute. Okay. And the traditional form has been REST API, or if you take it further down, you could have Yang or NetConf. NetConf is pretty old now. It's still used a lot, but it has some scalability issues. Not that it's bad, but it works very well. Okay. So most of the vendors, I would say, are very open to providing their APIs on how you can talk to their devices. But the fundamental problem is finding an integrator that understands routing, switching, storage, compute, and also programming at the same time. And that solution domain of expertise is where we participate in and we provide guidance in.
Got it. I mean, I guess then do the vendors themselves come to you, or do the enterprises come to you, or do the ISPs come to you? I mean, who comes to you and says, "Hey, we're looking to use your platform with what we have out in the market right now"?
So right now, it has primarily been the customers that have been coming to us. Okay. They do know that they would like to do some form of SD, software defined, and the main problem is their business. It's not software-defined networks. It's not software-defined security. It's not software-defined storage. Mm-hmm. It is their business. And so they do know that they have to reduce the time to repair. They know that they need to reduce errors when they try to execute commonly known procedures, but still get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And so they know they need to get to some software-defined state. But they are very confused given that there are a number of infrastructure providers out there. And how do you put this together? And then that's when we approach them and give them solutions across storage, security, and tell them what the choices are and come to a state where you can say, hey, given this state, and if they follow a certain programmable language, we can then take you to a software-defined business, networking being one of them, storage being one of them, security being one of them.
Makes sense. Now, and you kind of mentioned too, I mean, I'm sure there is some confusion out there because it does seem like this software-defined space has really kind of exploded, at least in the telecom world. Obviously, in the data center world and the IT world, it's been around for years and years and years. But at least when it comes to telecom operators, a lot of them that we talk with here, it's still somewhat new to them, and they're trying to get some sort of footing of what's happening out there on the market. I guess how challenging is it for them to kind of really be able to be confident in what's happening out in the market today?
So yes, there is a lot of information on different strategies, different approaches from the big companies on how to address this problem. And most of the companies have a blanket approach to solve this problem. And that's a very good approach. There are a lot of companies that are out there that solve 80% of the problem or the market space with their blanket approach. The ones that know that they are leading, let's assume the big social media companies, the big web search engine companies, the big DDoS mitigation companies, those blanket approaches do not work. They have to have custom solutions, not only custom solutions, but they also have to have custom APIs that have not even been thought of in the industry. They have to actually lead the charter for infrastructures to follow them because they are experiencing the field of pain in near real time for which vendors are not addressing. And it's that segment space that is wide open and open to interpretation and a lot of confusion. So there are a lot of meetups, a lot of open discussions, a lot of community tools inside Git to assist and aid people that are willing to take on the next generation of challenges without the backing of publicly traded companies.
Got it. So still a very collaborative effort out there, very collaborative work between a lot of companies. People are very open to kind of this working together at this point still.
Yes, I would say it's very collaborative. I would say that has always been the case in this industry from the 15 years that I've been in it. Primarily in the early days, it used to be a technology called MPLS. People used to collaborate, figure out solutions, and then it became mature and stable. You move on to the next set of features. Right now, it is SD, and there's a lot of solutions for SD, but there's a certain niche market where it is not addressable with a blanket solution. So it's still collaborative, yes.
Makes sense, man. Okay. Now, I guess as you look at, you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, kind of the scalability aspect of all this. I mean, how important is scalability? Because I'm guessing a lot of these companies out there, these enterprises out there that are going this way towards SD-WAN, some of them are 100 or less employees, some are 1,000 employees, some are 10,000. I mean, I'm guessing there's got to be a pretty important aspect of this is the scalability and making sure that these solutions can scale, a variety of ways and can scale pretty rapidly. I'm guessing a lot of these, internal IT organizations want to have some control over this as well. And so they have to have a fairly easy, scalable solution. How important is that aspect, and how well developed is the scalability of these solutions at this point?
So the scalability is very important. Addressing scalability on day one is very important. Does not necessarily mean that these IT companies that are employing this solution would hit that scalability. But when they do hit that hockey stick curve, they have very little time to react. So being able to provide that vision for a large scalable solution that is going to be at a global of nature, that is going to be instantaneous in nature is very, very important. The key fact is you may or may not reach it, but when you do reach it, you should be ready to address it. And addressing the design, the integration upfront is very important.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great point. It does make sense, like you said, that once you hit that inflection point there, if you're not ready for it, it could be a pretty tricky time frame for you. So I'm guessing that's got to be important to be ready for that.
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I guess maybe looking forward a bit on this. I mean, what are some of the bigger challenges you see? Facing the security issues. Obviously, as this move towards SDN continues by telecom operators. And that's kind of what we focus on mostly here at the telecom guys. But I mean, what sort of issues do you see out there in the market in terms of the continued adoption and development and deployment of these security solutions in an SD environment?
The biggest challenge that I see going forward is standardization.
Okay.
We need support from the vendors, whether they are open source hardware vendors, whether they are box vendors that are going to support these solutions. But if we do not have a standard to talk across them, the problem space becomes bigger and more channeled towards one solution, which may or may not be the right solution. It may be the right solution for Wall Street on a quarter-to-quarter basis, but not necessarily the right solution for the whole industry as a whole.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, because it does seem like I've talked to a lot of companies about, just various aspects of SDN and NFV and virtualization and cloud. And that standardization issue comes up quite often as being one of the big challenges going forward. And that's been like that, it seems like, from what I've been covering here for the past couple of years. I mean, is progress being made in this point? I mean, what do you think? I mean, I guess, what are we looking for to bring everybody together on the same page? Because that does seem like that's an ongoing challenge.
Yes, I think so. There's a lot of progress being made.
Okay.
There are a lot of vendors. They do talk a lot. They do actually provide solutions a lot. And it seems like we're going in the right direction. But it's not as fast as one would have anticipated, and the progress that Linux made over Solaris, and being able to indirectly disrupt the hardware platform from the software platform.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are still seeing segments of that. I think it's still a little ways away, but there's a lot of progress being made, a lot of community traction that is happening. And fortunately, some of the companies that would like to do this on their own are taking the challenge on themselves. And I would say that's even from the service provider world. Service providers within the US, service providers in Japan, in Germany, that are large enough and are understanding how traditional content providers have taken the challenge and address the solution themselves. The service providers themselves are also taking that challenge and trying to address this standardization problem.
Then I guess how good is that for vendors like yourselves? I mean, is that a positive that people are kind of taking this on their own, or would it be better if they waited for standards? Or I guess what's your view on these companies being a little more aggressive in that front? Because it does seem like that is happening quite a bit.
Yes, I think so. Independent of how we are positioned, I think there's always going to be some form of automation integration.
Yeah.
The ability to standardize it makes our job slightly easier to integrate, as opposed to participating in an open field of 10 different standards or 15 different standards. So if that field is narrowed, it's just that the integrators providing that service is just it's much more concise mm-hmm. and much more effective for the enterprises to adopt. Right now, the playing field is wide open, and integrators like us have to provide guidance on a larger field, but that doesn't change when the playing field of standards reduces.
Makes sense. And obviously, it seems like, too, obviously, that's kind of one of the benefits of software in general, is that it is somewhat easier to kind of port your platform to various models. I mean, you can obviously change things up fairly rapidly as compared to, more of a hardware-centric type of world. Obviously, software makes that quite a bit easier, too.
Yes, I would agree. It definitely does. Not only just to port, but it definitely aids businesses to move in a much more rapid fashion. So basically, one would like to think about the software services in Amazon or AWS, to be precise. But there are other companies that have all their business in Azure. So how do you actually port that into Azure? With ability for us to do it in Dockers and control the same infrastructure, it just lends the businesses portability also much easier.
Makes sense. That's great. Well, hey, Nitin, we definitely appreciate the insight on this today. Obviously, it's a topic, like I was saying earlier, I'm getting a lot of interest from a lot of different companies, a lot of different of our readers on this topic. So we're trying to cover it here more and more as much as we can. But we definitely appreciate the insight on this today. Obviously, it's a growing market, and you guys are pretty busy there, it sounds like, in keeping up with it. So we definitely appreciate the insight today on that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me on this call and doing the interview. Thank you.
No problem at all. And hopefully we can touch base again soon on the topic.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Well, great insight there from Nitin, and some good insight there from Serro Solutions. Well, that'll do it for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. Make sure to check us out again next week when we are scheduled to have more news from the NFV SDN and cloud space, as well as speak with Diego Lopez, who is the technical manager at Etsy and Telefonica, to get an update on Etsy's NFV program. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.